History is written by the victors. It is a story shaped by conquest, a narrative polished by propaganda, and in the grand sweeping epic of the Roman Republic's final bloody chapter, the victor's ink was used to draw a caricature of a woman. They painted her as a seductress, a decadent foreign queen who ensnared great Roman generals in her web of exotic luxury and illicit passion. They called her the Serpent of the Nile, a beautiful, dangerous creature whose ambition threatened the very soul of Rome. For 2,000 years, this is the story that has echoed through the halls of time, a tale of lust, betrayal, and downfall. But this is not that story. This is the story of a queen, a scholar, a diplomat, a woman of intellect and ambition who navigated a world of powerful men to protect her kingdom, her people, her legacy. This is the story of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, and it begins not with a whisper of seduction, but with the weight of a crown. The world into which Cleopatra was born was a world of fading glory and rising shadows. The Ptolemaic dynasty, a lineage of Macedonian Greeks who had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, was in a slow, graceful decline. Like a magnificent, ancient tapestry, its vibrant colors were beginning to fray at the edges. The kingdom's wealth, once the envy of the Mediterranean, was a constant temptation to the burgeoning power of Rome, a republic whose own ambitions were as vast and insatiable as the desert sands. Cleopatra entered this world in the year 69 BC, a pearl born from a troubled oyster. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was a man who carried the title of pharaoh, but his authority was a fragile thing, propped up by Roman gold and the hollow echo of his ancestors' greatness. He was known to his people not as a mighty ruler, but as Auletes, the flute player, a name that dripped with a certain disdain. It spoke of a king more interested in the melodies of his own private pleasures than the discordant symphony of his kingdom's problems. From her earliest days, the young princess was a creature of 2 worlds. Within the cool marble halls of the royal palace in Alexandria, she was immersed in the rich tapestry of Hellenistic culture. Her education was a feast for a hungry mind. She studied the philosophies of Plato and Aristotle, the epic poems of Homer, the intricate theorems of Euclid. Her tutors, the finest scholars drawn from the great library of Alexandria, marveled at her quick wit and insatiable curiosity. She was not merely a student, she was a crucible of knowledge, absorbing the wisdom of the ages with an almost preternatural ease. But beyond the palace walls, another world beckoned, a world of ancient gods and mystical traditions. This was the Egypt of the pharaohs, a land of sprawling temples and towering pyramids, where the Nile's annual flood was a sacred promise of life and renewal. Unlike her predecessors, who had remained aloof in their Greekness, Cleopatra possessed a rare and powerful gift, an intuitive understanding that to rule Egypt, one must first embrace its soul. She learned the ancient Egyptian language, its complex hieroglyphs, a secret garden she was determined to unlock. She listened to the priests' tales of Isis and Osiris, of Horus and Ra, their stories weaving themselves into the fabric of her being. She understood that in the hearts of her people, the pharaoh was not just a king, but a god on earth, a living link between the mortal and the divine. Her childhood was a study in contrasts, the disciplined pursuit of knowledge, punctuated by the chaotic drumbeat of political instability. She witnessed her father's desperate dance to appease his Roman patrons, the exorbitant taxes he levied on his people to fill the coffers of corrupt senators. She saw the simmering resentment in the eyes of the Alexandrian mob, a volatile sea of discontent that could erupt into a storm at any moment. and she learned a crucial lesson, a lesson that would shape her destiny. That power was a slippery eel, and to hold it, one needed not just a strong grip, but a cunning mind. The palace itself was a gilded cage, a world of whispered conspiracies and shifting allegiances. Her own family was a nest of vipers. Her older sister, Berenice, was a woman of ruthless ambition, her eyes already fixed on the throne. Her younger siblings, Arsinoe, Ptolemy the 13th, and Ptolemy the 14th, were pawns in a game whose rules were constantly changing. In this treacherous environment, Cleopatra learned to be watchful, to listen more than she spoke, to mask her thoughts behind a serene and enigmatic smile. She was a quiet observer, a student of human nature, her mind a sharp and silent blade being honed in the fires of adversity. As she blossomed into womanhood, her beauty became a subject of whispered admiration, but it was not the fragile, ethereal beauty of a pampered princess. Hers was a beauty that radiated from within, a reflection of her keen intellect and indomitable spirit. Her eyes, it was said, held the mysteries of the cosmos, her voice a captivating melody that could soothe a troubled heart or stir a slumbering soul. She possessed a charisma, a magnetism that drew people to her, a quality that would prove to be a more potent weapon than any army. And so, the serpent's egg was nurtured in a cradle of fading power and burgeoning ambition. It was a world that taught her to be many things, a scholar and a strategist, a diplomat and a survivor. It was a world that prepared her for the day when the weight of the double crown of Egypt would be placed upon her head, a day that was fast approaching, a day that would plunge her into a vortex of civil war, Roman intervention, and a destiny that would forever be entwined with the fate of the world. The young princess, the flute player's daughter, was about to become a queen, and the world would never be the same. The year is 51 BC. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, flows with a sluggish and uncertain current. A drought has parched the fertile lands, and the granaries, once overflowing, are a somber testament to the kingdom's dwindling fortunes. Famine, a specter that haunts the land of the pharaohs, stalks the villages and cities, its cold breath stirring the embers of discontent. And in the opulent heart of Alexandria, Ptolemy the 12th, the flute player, has breathed his last. His reign, a symphony of missed opportunities and Roman appeasement, has ended on a mournful note. His will, a document dictated more by Roman interests than paternal affection, decrees that his eldest daughter, Cleopatra, now a young woman of 18, and her younger brother, the 10-year-old Ptolemy, the 13th, shall rule together. It is a formula for disaster, a political marriage of convenience that ignores the simmering cauldron of ambition and resentment that is the Ptolemaic court. The tradition of sibling co-rulership, once a symbol of dynastic unity, has become a breeding ground for intrigue and betrayal. Cleopatra, however, is not her father. She does not inherit the throne with a sigh of resignation or a quiver of fear. She ascends it with a mind as sharp as a newly forged sword, and a will as unyielding as the granite of the pyramids. She has spent her life preparing for this moment, her every lesson in philosophy, every whispered conversation in the palace corridors, every prayer in the ancient temples, a step on the path to power. She understands that to rule is not merely to command, but to persuade, to inspire, to embody the very essence of Egypt. From the outset, she makes it clear that she will not be a silent partner in her brother's reign. Her name appears before his on official documents, a subtle but significant declaration of her seniority and authority. She adopts the title Theophilopatra, the father-loving goddess, a clever political move that aligns her with her father's memory while simultaneously elevating her own status. She appears in public not just as a Greek queen, but as an Egyptian pharaoh, adorned in the traditional regalia, her presence a living bridge between the two cultures that define her kingdom. But her assertion of power does not go unchallenged. A triumvirate of powerful men, the eunuch Pothinus, the general Achilles, and the rhetorician Theodotus of Chios, have taken her young brother under their wing. They see in him a malleable puppet, a means to consolidate their own power and influence. They whisper in his ear, poisoning his mind against his sister, painting her as a threat to his throne, an ambitious woman who seeks to rule alone. They are the puppeteers, and the boy king is their marionette, his every move dictated by their self-serving ambitions. The court becomes a chessboard, and Cleopatra and the triumvirate are the master players. Every decree, every appointment, every public appearance is a calculated move in a deadly game. Cleopatra, with her intelligence and charisma, appeals directly to the people. She speaks their language. She participates in their religious festivals. She understands their hopes and fears. She is a visible and accessible ruler, a stark contrast to the secluded and manipulated boy king. But the triumvirate holds a powerful weapon, control of the army. They use it to intimidate her supporters, to isolate her within the palace, to create an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The whispers of conspiracy grow louder. The shadows in the palace corridors lengthen. Cleopatra realizes that her position in Alexandria is becoming untenable. Her life is in danger. Well, in the deserts of Syria, she does not weep or lament her fate. She raises an army. She uses her charm and intelligence to win the support of local rulers, her knowledge of diplomacy to forge alliances. She is no longer just a queen. She is a general, a warrior, a woman fighting for her birthright. She is a testament to the fact that true power lies not in a throne or a crown, but in the indomitable spirit of the individual. He is fatally mistaken. The triumvirate, in a desperate and short-sighted attempt to curry favor with the victorious Caesar, make a fateful decision. They have Pompey assassinated as he steps ashore, his head presented to Caesar as a gruesome trophy. It is a move born of fear and political naivety, and it will have catastrophic consequences. Caesar, a man who respected his enemies even in defeat, is horrified by this act of treachery. He arrives in Alexandria not as a grateful ally, but as an incensed and powerful arbiter. The stage is now set for one of the most dramatic encounters in history. Caesar, the most powerful man in the world, is in Alexandria. The boy king and his manipulative advisors believe they have him in their pocket, but they have underestimated the serpent. Cleopatra, the exiled queen, sees her opportunity. She knows that to win back her kingdom, she must win over Caesar, and she will do it not with an army, but with a stroke of audacious genius, a move so bold, so unexpected, that it will forever be etched in the annals of history. The serpent is about to strike. The air in Alexandria is thick with tension. The city, a vibrant jewel on the Mediterranean coast, has become a cage of intrigue. Julius Caesar, the master of Rome, is ensconced in the royal palace, a guest whose power far outweighs that of his hosts. The young Ptolemy XIII and his advisors, Pothinus and Achilles, scurry to and fro, their attempts to control the situation growing more desperate by the hour. They believe they have contained the threat of Cleopatra, her army stalled at the Egyptian border. They are wrong. Cleopatra knows that a direct assault on the city is impossible. Achilles' army is too strong. The city's defenses too formidable. She must find another way to reach Caesar, to plead her case, to remind him of her father's alliance with Rome. She needs to bypass the guards, the spies, the ever-watchful eyes of her enemies. She needs a plan that is as audacious as it is brilliant, a gambit that will leave her adversaries stunned and speechless. And so a legend is born. The story, whispered through the corridors of history, tells of a woman who, with the help of a loyal servant named Apollodorus, conceals herself within a rolled-up carpet, or perhaps a linen sack. The accounts vary, but the essence of the tale remains the same. It is an act of breathtaking courage and theatrical flair, a Trojan horse in reverse, delivering not an army of soldiers, but a single determined queen. Imagine the scene. Apollodorus, a man of strong back and steady nerve, slings the precious cargo over his shoulder. He navigates the bustling streets of Alexandria, the cries of street vendors, and the murmur of the crowd, a symphony of mundane life that masks his extraordinary mission. He approaches the palace, his heart a steady drum against his ribs. He talks his way past the Roman guards, his story of a humble gift for Caesar, a masterpiece of convincing deception. He is granted entry, his every step a triumph of audacity over adversity. He is brought before Caesar, the great Roman general, his face etched with the lines of countless battles and political intrigues, watches with a mixture of curiosity and impatience as the servant unrolls his offering, and then, from the folds of the carpet, emerges not a treasure of gold or jewels, but a woman, Cleopatra. Her hair, the color of midnight, is slightly disheveled. Her eyes, the color of the deepest sea, are filled with a fiery determination. She stands before him, not as a supplicant, but as a queen who has come to reclaim her throne. Caesar is utterly captivated. He is a man who has seen everything, done everything, conquered everything. He has faced down Gallic hordes and Roman legions. He has navigated the treacherous currents of the Senate, but he has never encountered anyone like this. A woman who combines the intellect of a scholar, the courage of a warrior, and the charisma of a goddess. He is 52 years old, a man in the autumn of his life. She is 21, a woman in the first bloom of her power, but in that moment, they are not defined by age or title. They are two extraordinary individuals, drawn together by the irresistible forces of destiny and mutual fascination. Their conversation, it is said, lasts long into the night. She speaks to him, not in her native Greek, but in flawless Latin, her words a mesmerizing blend of flattery, logic, and passion. She reminds him of her father's loyalty to Rome, of the debts that Egypt still owes. She paints a vivid picture of her brother's treachery, of the corruption and instability that has gripped her kingdom. She presents herself not as a damsel in distress, but as a capable and intelligent ruler who, with Rome's support, can restore order and prosperity to Egypt, a prosperous Egypt that will be a valuable ally to Rome. Caesar, the consummate pragmatist, sees the wisdom in her words. He has no love for the treacherous courtiers who murdered his rival, Pompey. He sees in Cleopatra a leader he can trust, an ally he can depend on. But his decision is not based on political calculation alone. He is a man who has always been drawn to a sharp mind and a bold spirit, and Cleopatra possesses both in abundance. He is charmed by her wit, impressed by her knowledge, and yes, intrigued by her beauty. A bond is forged between them, a bond that is part political alliance, part intellectual kinship, and part something more, something that will change the course of both their lives. When dawn breaks over Alexandria, Caesar summons Ptolemy XIII and his advisors. He announces his decision. Cleopatra is to be restored to her rightful place on the throne, to rule alongside her brother as their father's will dictated. The boy king is stunned. his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. Pothinus and Achilles are apoplectic. Their carefully constructed world of power and influence has been shattered by a woman in a carpet. Their puppet king has been upstaged, their authority undermined. They do not accept defeat gracefully. Achilles, the general, rallies his army, 20,000 strong, and marches on the palace. The Alexandrian War has begun. The city becomes a battlefield, the streets a labyrinth of death and destruction. Caesar, with his small Roman garrison, is trapped in the royal quarter, besieged by a vastly superior force. The great library of Alexandria, a beacon of knowledge and learning, is set ablaze during the fighting, its priceless scrolls turning to ash in the flames of war. A tragic loss for all of humanity. For months, the battle rages. It is a brutal and desperate struggle. Caesar, the military genius, uses every ounce of his skill and experience to hold off the enemy. He directs his soldiers with a calm and steady hand, his presence a source of inspiration and courage, and Cleopatra is by his side, not as a frightened queen hiding in her chambers, but as an active partner in the fight for their survival. She offers strategic advice, her knowledge of the city and its people proving invaluable. She rallies her supporters, her voice a beacon of hope in the midst of chaos. Finally, Roman reinforcements arrive. The tide of the war turns. In a decisive battle on the banks of the Nile, Caesar's forces crush the army of Ptolemy XIII. The young king, in a desperate attempt to flee, is drowned in the river, his golden armor dragging him down into the murky depths. Pothinus is executed for his treachery. Arsinoe, Cleopatra's ambitious younger sister, who had joined the rebellion, is taken captive. The serpent has not just survived, she has triumphed. The queen's gambit has paid off. Cleopatra, with Julius Caesar at her side, is once again the undisputed ruler of Egypt. But her victory has come at a price, and the game is far from over. The Roman eagle has landed in the land of the pharaohs, and its shadow will loom large over her reign. The fires of the Alexandrian War have been extinguished, leaving behind a city scarred but not broken. The cries of battle have been replaced by the murmur of a populace weary of conflict, yearning for the return of peace and stability. The boy king, Ptolemy XIII, is gone, swallowed by the very river that gives his kingdom life. His treacherous advisors have met their just and bloody end, and Cleopatra, the serpent, who outwitted them all, sits once more upon the throne of Egypt. But she is not alone. Julius Caesar, the architect of her victory, remains in Alexandria. The official reason for his extended stay is to settle the affairs of Egypt, to ensure a smooth transition of power. But there is another reason, a reason that is whispered in the palace corridors and gossiped about in the city's marketplaces. The 52-year-old Roman dictator, a man who has conquered empires and bedded countless women, is utterly and completely captivated by the 21-year-old Egyptian queen. Their relationship, born in the crucible of war, blossoms in the fragile peace that follows. It is a meeting of minds as much as a meeting of hearts. They spend their days in long conversations, their discussions ranging from the intricacies of Roman politics to the mysteries of Egyptian theology. Caesar, a man of insatiable curiosity, is fascinated by Cleopatra's intellect, by her deep understanding of history, philosophy, and the art of governance. She is his equal in a way that no Roman woman, confined by the strictures of a patriarchal society, could ever be. Cleopatra, in turn, sees in Caesar a man of immense power and vision, a man who can not only protect her kingdom, but also help her restore it to its former glory. She is a student of his military genius, a keen observer of his political acumen. She learns from him the art of wielding power on a global scale, the delicate dance of diplomacy and military might. Their relationship is a symbiosis, a fusion of Roman steel and Egyptian gold, of pragmatic ambition and ancient wisdom. To celebrate their victory and to solidify Cleopatra's hold on the throne, they embark on a magnificent journey up the Nile. It is a spectacle of unparalleled grandeur, a floating palace of pleasure and propaganda. A fleet of 400 ships accompanies them, their sails a vibrant splash of color against the azure sky. The royal barge, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, is a floating testament to the wealth and splendor of Egypt. Its decks are adorned with silken canopies, its halls filled with the music of lutes and harps, its air thick with the scent of exotic perfumes and rare incense. As they drift along the sacred river, they are greeted by crowds of adoring Egyptians. For them, this journey is more than just a royal procession. It is a divine affirmation. Cleopatra, dressed in the shimmering robes of the goddess Isis, appears before them as a living deity, her presence a promise of a new golden age. Caesar, the powerful Roman general, is seen as her divine consort, a protector sent by the gods to safeguard their queen and their kingdom. It is a masterful piece of political theater, a way of weaving Caesar into the fabric of Egyptian life, of transforming him from a foreign conqueror into a welcome ally. But this journey is also a private idyll, a stolen moment of peace and intimacy away from the prying eyes of the Alexandrian court. They explore the ancient temples that line the riverbanks, their stone walls covered with the stories of gods and pharaohs. They marvel at the colossal statues of Ramses the Great at Abu Simbel, their silent gaze a testament to the enduring power of a bygone era. They hunt for crocodiles in the marshy wetlands, their laughter echoing across the still waters. In the warm starlit nights, they recline on the deck of the royal barge, the gentle lapping of the waves a soothing lullaby, their conversation a quiet murmur against the backdrop of the sleeping world. It is during this idyllic journey that a new life is conceived, a life that will forever bind them together. Cleopatra becomes pregnant with Caesar's child, a son who will be named Ptolemy Caesar, but who will be known to the world as Caesarion, Little Caesar. He is a symbol of their union, a living embodiment of the fusion of East and West, a potential heir to two of the world's greatest empires. His birth is a source of immense joy for Cleopatra, a fulfillment of her deepest desires as a woman and a queen. For her, Caesarion is not just a son, he is the future of her dynasty, the key to securing Egypt's independence for generations to come. But the idyll on the Nile cannot last forever. The world beyond Egypt's borders is in turmoil. Caesar's presence is required in Rome, where his enemies are plotting against him and his allies are growing restless. He must leave the land of the pharaohs, the warm embrace of its queen, and return to the cold, hard realities of Roman politics. Before he departs, he solidifies Cleopatra's power. He has her younger brother, the 12-year-old Ptolemy XIV, marry her and become her co-ruler. It is a political necessity, a way of adhering to Ptolemaic tradition, but it is a marriage in name only. Cleopatra is the true ruler of Egypt, her authority absolute and unquestioned. Caesar leaves a Roman garrison in Alexandria to protect her, a clear message to any who would dare to challenge her reign. Their farewell is a poignant one, a mixture of love and longing, of promises made and futures uncertain. As Caesar's ship disappears over the horizon, Cleopatra stands on the shore, her hand resting on her swelling belly. She has won back her kingdom. She has won the heart of the most powerful man in the world, and she carries his child. The serpent has not only ascended to the throne, she has secured her legacy, but the shadow of Rome is long, and the path ahead is fraught with peril. The next chapter of her life will take her to the very heart of the empire, to a city that is both in awe of her and deeply suspicious of her power, a city called Rome. The year is 46 BC. 2 years have passed since Caesar's departure from Alexandria. 2 years in which Cleopatra has ruled Egypt with a firm and capable hand. The famines that plagued the early years of her reign have subsided, the granaries are once again full, and a fragile prosperity has returned to the land. She has proven herself to be a shrewd administrator, a queen who is as adept at managing the complexities of the economy as she is at navigating the treacherous currents of court politics. Her son, Caesarion, is a thriving toddler, his laughter echoing through the halls of the palace, a constant reminder of his powerful Roman father. But Cleopatra's world is about to expand beyond the borders of her beloved Egypt. Caesar, having crushed the last vestiges of Pompey's supporters in a series of brilliant military campaigns, has returned to Rome in triumph. He is at the zenith of his power, the undisputed master of the Roman world, and he has extended an invitation to the Queen of Egypt, an invitation she cannot refuse. She is to come to Rome as a client queen, a formal recognition of her status as an ally of the Roman Republic. But for both of them, this visit is about more than just politics. It is a chance to rekindle their relationship, to present their son to the world, and perhaps to dream of a future that will unite their two great empires. Cleopatra's arrival in Rome is a spectacle that leaves the city breathless. She does not enter the city as a humble supplicant, but as a queen of immense wealth and power. Her entourage is a dazzling display of oriental splendor, a procession of exotic animals, bare-breasted handmaidens, and eunuch servants, all designed to showcase the fabulous wealth of her kingdom. She herself is a vision of divine majesty, adorned in the robes of Isis, her presence radiating an aura of mystique and power. The Roman people, accustomed to the austere and sober virtues of their republic, are both fascinated and appalled by this display of foreign opulence. Caesar installs her and her entourage, including her young son and her nominal husband-brother, Ptolemy XIV, in his luxurious villa on the far side of the river Tiber. It is a magnificent estate with sprawling gardens and breathtaking views of the city. But its location is significant. By keeping her outside the official boundaries of Rome, Caesar is adhering to Roman law, which forbids a foreign monarch from entering the city. But it is also a way of keeping her at a slight distance, a recognition of the delicate political situation he faces. The Roman Senate, that bastion of conservative tradition, is deeply suspicious of this foreign queen. They see her as a threat to their republican values, a symbol of the decadent Eastern monarchies they have long despised. Her relationship with Caesar is a source of endless gossip and scandal. The fact that he is already married to a respectable Roman woman, Calpurnia, only adds fuel to the fire. The whispers grow louder. What are Caesar's true intentions? Does he plan to divorce his wife and marry this foreign sorceress? Does he intend to make himself a king, with Cleopatra as his queen, and move the capital of the empire to Alexandria? Caesar, for his part, does little to quell the rumors. He is a man who has always enjoyed defying convention, and he seems to revel in the controversy that surrounds his relationship with Cleopatra. He commissions a golden statue of her, depicted as the goddess Isis, and places it in the Temple of Venus Genetrix, a temple he has built to honor his own divine ancestress. It is an act of breathtaking audacity, a public declaration of her divine status, and her importance in his life. It is also a direct challenge to the Roman establishment, a clear signal that he is no longer bound by their rules or their traditions. That despite the political turmoil, Cleopatra's time in Rome is a period of intellectual and cultural exchange. She holds court in Caesar's villa, her salon a gathering place for Rome's brightest minds. Poets, philosophers, and historians flock to see her, eager to engage in conversation with this brilliant and charismatic queen. She is a patron of the arts and sciences, her knowledge and intelligence earning her the respect and admiration of those who are not blinded by prejudice. She also uses her time in Rome to further her political ambitions. She lobbies for Roman recognition of her son, Caesarion, as Caesar's legitimate heir. It is a bold and audacious goal, one that strikes at the very heart of Roman law and tradition. But Cleopatra is a woman who has never been afraid to dream big. She envisions a future where her son will rule over a vast Greco-Roman empire and a new world order with its centers of power in both Rome and Alexandria. But this dream is built on a foundation of sand. Caesar's power, while seemingly absolute, is dangerously precarious. His monarchical ambitions, his disdain for republican traditions, and his scandalous affair with a foreign queen have earned him many enemies. A conspiracy is brewing in the shadows of the Senate, a conspiracy of men who call themselves the liberators, men who believe that Caesar is a tyrant who must be stopped at any cost. The Ides of March, a date that will forever live in infamy, is fast approaching. The serpent, in her gilded cage on the banks of the Tiber, is blissfully unaware of the storm that is about to break. She has conquered the heart of Caesar, she has dazzled the city of Rome, and she believes that her future and the future of her son is secure. She has forgotten a crucial lesson from her own tumultuous past, that the higher one climbs, the more treacherous the fall. The serpent has entered the lion's den, and the lions are about to strike. The Roman winter of 44 BC is a season of ill omens. Strange lights are seen in the sky, the sound of clashing arms is heard in the dead of night, and a sense of foreboding hangs heavy in the air. The city, once a beacon of republican virtue, has become a hotbed of conspiracy and discontent. The power of one man, Gaius Julius Caesar, has grown too great, his ambition too vast. He has been declared dictator for life, a title that is but a whisper away from king. And in the minds of many Romans, a king is a tyrant, a threat to the very soul of the republic. The whispers of conspiracy have grown into a roar in the shadowy porticos of the Senate House. A group of men, led by the stern and idealistic Marcus Junius Brutus and the ambitious and resentful Gaius Cassius Longinus, have made a pact. They will be the saviors of the Republic. They will be the liberators of Rome. They will assassinate Caesar. Cleopatra, in her splendid villa across the Tiber, is a world away from these deadly intrigues. She is immersed in her own plans, her own ambitions. Her days are filled with the laughter of her young son, Caesarion, and her nights are filled with the company of the man she loves. She has grown accustomed to the rhythms of Roman life, the intellectual sparring in her salon, the subtle dance of diplomacy. She believes that her position and that of her son is secure, guaranteed by the unassailable power of Caesar. She has allowed herself to become complacent, to forget that power in Rome is a fleeting and fickle thing. The 15th of March dawns gray and overcast. Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, has been plagued by nightmares. She dreams that their house is collapsing, that she is holding her husband's bleeding body in her arms. She begs him not to go to the Senate that day. A soothsayer, a man named Spurinna, has warned him to beware the Ides of March. But Caesar, a man who has never shied away from danger, a man who believes himself to be untouchable, dismisses their fears. Cowards die many times before their deaths, he says. The valiant never taste of death but once. He is a man in the grip of his own legend, a man who cannot see the precipice that lies just ahead. He makes his way to the theater of Pompey, where the Senate is meeting. As he enters, he sees the soothsayer, Spurinna, and remarks with a smile, "The Ides of March have come." "Aye, Caesar," the soothsayer replies, "but not yet gone." Inside the Senate house, the conspirators are waiting. They surround him, pretending to be supplicants. One of them, Tillius Cimber, grabs his toga, pulling it from his shoulders. It is the signal. The first dagger strikes, then another and another. They come at him from all sides, a frenzy of flashing steel and grunting fury. He tries to fight back, to defend himself, but he is overwhelmed. He sees the face of Brutus, a man he had once considered a son, his dagger raised to strike. "Et tu, Brute?" he whispers, his voice a mixture of shock and betrayal. "You too, my child?" And then he pulls his toga over his head, resigning himself to his fate. He falls at the base of a statue of his great rival, Pompey, his lifeblood staining the cold marble floor. The master of Rome is dead. The news of Caesar's assassination spreads through the city. Like a wildfire, pandemonium erupts. The senators, even those who were not part of the conspiracy, flee in terror. The conspirators, their daggers still dripping with Caesar's blood, march to the forum, proclaiming that they have restored liberty to Rome. But the people do not greet them as heroes. They are met with a stunned and fearful silence. The city is in a state of shock, paralyzed by a mixture of grief, fear, and uncertainty. For Cleopatra, the news is a cataclysm. Her world, so carefully constructed, has been shattered in an instant. The man she loved, the father of her child, the protector of her kingdom, is gone. Her position in Rome, once a symbol of her power and influence, is now a source of extreme peril. She is a foreign queen in a city that is teetering on the brink of civil war. Her life and the life of her son are in grave danger. She acts quickly, decisively. There is no time for grief, no time for tears. She must be a queen, a mother, a survivor. She gathers her entourage, her treasures, her son. Under the cover of darkness, she flees the city. Her departure is as swift and silent as her arrival was dazzling and ostentatious. She makes her way back to Egypt, back to the safety of her own kingdom, the dream of a Greco-Roman empire lying in ruins behind her. She returns to Alexandria, a different woman. The naive optimism, the belief in a shared destiny with Rome, has been replaced by a hardened and cynical realism. She has learned the bitter lesson that Roman politics is a deadly game, and that alliances are as fragile as glass. She has learned that to survive, she must rely on herself and herself alone. Back in her own land, she moves to consolidate her power. Her co-ruler and younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, dies shortly after her return. The circumstances are suspicious, and many believe that Cleopatra, no longer willing to share her throne with a potential rival, had him poisoned. She immediately elevates her 3-year-old son, Caesarion, to the position of co-ruler. He is now Ptolemy XV Caesar, the living embodiment of her claim to a divine and powerful lineage. The serpent has retreated to her lair, wounded but not broken. She has lost her king, but she has saved her queen and her prince. She will bide her time. She will rebuild her strength. She will watch and wait. The Roman world is about to be plunged into another bloody civil war. a war that will decide the fate of Caesar's legacy. And in this new war, new players will emerge, new alliances will be forged. And one of these new players, a man who was Caesar's most loyal and trusted general, is about to turn his gaze towards the east, towards the land of the Nile, towards its enigmatic and powerful queen. His name is Mark Antony, and his arrival will mark the beginning of the final dramatic chapter in the life of Cleopatra. The death of Julius Caesar did not bring peace to the Roman world. It unleashed a whirlwind of chaos. The so-called liberators, Brutus and Cassius, fled to the eastern provinces, where they raised an army to defend the crumbling republic. In Rome, a new power struggle erupted. On one side was Octavian, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son, a young man of 19, cold, calculating, and possessed of a political genius that belied his years. On the other side was Mark Antony, Caesar's most loyal general, a man of immense charisma and military prowess, but also a man given to extravagance and impulsive passions. These two, along with a third, lesser figure named Lepidus, formed the second triumvirate. They were united by a common goal, to avenge the death of Caesar and to crush his assassins. In the bloody Battle of Philippi, they succeeded. Brutus and Cassius, their dream of a restored republic lying in tatters, took their own lives. The triumvirs were now the masters of the Roman world. They carved up the empire between them, Octavian taking the west, Antony the east, and Lepidus the consolation prize of Africa. Antony, now in his early 40s, was in his element in the east. He was a man who had always been drawn to the opulent and sophisticated culture of the Hellenistic world. He saw himself not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, a new Dionysus bringing an era of peace and prosperity to the war-torn provinces. He established his headquarters in the city of Tarsus in modern-day Turkey, and from there he set about reorganizing the East, rewarding his allies and punishing his enemies. And one of the most important figures on his list was the Queen of Egypt, Cleopatra. Her role in the civil war had been ambiguous. She had not openly supported the liberators, but she had not actively aided the triumvirs either. Antony, who was in desperate need of money to fund his long-planned invasion of the Parthian Empire, Rome's most formidable enemy in the east, needed to know where she stood, and he needed her wealth. He sent a summons to Cleopatra, ordering her to come to Tarsus to explain her actions. It was a command, not an invitation, and it was a command that Cleopatra could not ignore, but she did not rush to obey. She was a queen, not a servant, and she would meet the new master of the East on her own terms. She delayed her departure, letting Antony's anticipation and impatience grow. She knew the power of a grand entrance, the importance of making a first impression that would be impossible to forget. She was not just going to meet Mark Antony, she was going to captivate him. And so, in the year 41 BC, she set sail for Tarsus. Her arrival was a masterpiece of political theater, a spectacle so dazzling that it would be immortalized in the writings of Plutarch and the plays of Shakespeare. She did not arrive on a warship, but on a magnificent barge, its purple sails catching the gentle breeze, its oars of silver beating time to the music of flutes and lyres. She herself was reclining on a golden couch under a canopy of cloth of gold, dressed in the shimmering robes of the goddess Venus, or Aphrodite, as the Greeks called her. She was fanned by young boys dressed as cupids, and her handmaidens, the most beautiful women of her court, were dressed as sea nymphs and graces. The air was filled with the scent of exotic perfumes, burnt on the deck of the barge, their fragrant smoke drifting to the shore, announcing her arrival long before she was visible. The people of Tarsus, hearing that Venus had come to feast with Bacchus, as Antony was fond of calling himself, flocked to the harbor to witness this incredible sight. Antony himself was left sitting alone in the marketplace, his tribunal empty, his summons forgotten. He had expected a client queen to come and beg for his forgiveness. Instead, a goddess had come to invite him into her world. He sent a message inviting her to dine with him. She replied with a message of her own, inviting him to dine with her on her barge. It was a subtle but clear statement of her status. She was not his subordinate, she was his equal. Antony, charmed and intrigued, accepted. The banquet she hosted that night was a feast for the senses. The barge was illuminated by 1,000 lights, their reflections dancing on the dark water. The food was a dazzling array of exotic delicacies. The wine flowed freely from golden goblets, and the conversation was as sparkling as the jewels that adorned the queen's neck. Cleopatra was in her element. She was a brilliant conversationalist, her wit as sharp as her mind. She could be playful and flirtatious one moment, serious and philosophical. The next, she spoke to Antony in his own language, shared his love of wine and laughter, and matched his boisterous and larger-than-life personality. Antony was completely and utterly smitten. He was a man who had always been a slave to his passions, and he had never met a woman who could ignite them like Cleopatra. She was everything he had ever desired in a woman: intelligent, powerful, beautiful, and possessed of a spirit that was as wild and untamed as his own. He had come to Tarsus to question a queen, to judge her loyalty, and to demand her money. He ended up losing his heart. He agreed to all her requests. He confirmed her as the rightful ruler of Egypt, and her son Caesarion as her co-ruler. He even had her ambitious sister, Arsinoe, who was living in exile in the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, put to death, eliminating the last remaining threat to Cleopatra's throne. He abandoned his plans for the Parthian invasion. He abandoned his duties as a triumvir. He abandoned his wife, Fulvia, who was back in Italy fighting to protect his interests against the rising power of Octavian. He followed Cleopatra to Alexandria, a willing captive of the serpent of the Nile. The most powerful man in the East had been ensnared, and a love affair had begun that would shake the foundations of the Roman world, a love affair that would ultimately lead them both to a tragic and spectacular doom. The winter of 41 to 40 BC was a season of unparalleled revelry. In Alexandria, the city, with its magnificent palaces, its bustling markets, and its vibrant intellectual life, became a playground for the world's most glamorous and powerful couple. Mark Antony, the battle-hardened Roman general, and Cleopatra, the brilliant Egyptian queen, plunged themselves into a life of extravagant pleasure and hedonistic delight. It was a winter of endless feasting, of lavish parties that lasted until dawn, of a love affair that was as passionate and tempestuous as the two people at its heart. They formed a society, a private club of their closest friends and companions, which they called the Inimitable Livers. Its purpose was simple: to live a life of such exquisite and varied pleasure that it could never be imitated. Each day brought a new and more spectacular entertainment. They would host elaborate banquets, each one trying to outdo the other in opulence and originality. One night, the floor of the dining hall might be covered in a thick carpet of roses, their fragrant petals a soft and luxurious cushion for the feet of the guests. The next, the ceiling might be opened to shower them with a cascade of fragrant blossoms. The food was a symphony of exotic flavors, the wine a river of liquid gold. But their revels were not confined to the gilded halls of the palace. They would disguise themselves as common servants and wander through the streets of Alexandria at night. their laughter echoing in the narrow alleyways. They would play pranks on the unsuspecting citizens of the city, knocking on doors and windows, engaging in boisterous and drunken escapades. Antony, a man who had always possessed a common touch, relished these moments of anonymous freedom. He loved the energy of the city, the wit of its people, the feeling of being just another reveler in a world of endless celebration. Cleopatra, too, seemed to delight in this carefree existence. She was a woman who had spent her entire life under the immense pressure of the crown, her every move scrutinized, her every word weighed. With Antony, she could be herself. She could be playful, impulsive, and gloriously alive. She was not just a queen, she was a woman in love, and she embraced the passion and joy of her relationship with an open heart. But beneath the surface of this glittering whirlwind of pleasure, a deeper connection was being forged. Their relationship was not just about feasting and revelry, it was also about a shared intellectual and political vision. They would spend long hours in the great library, or what remained of it, discussing history, philosophy, and the art of war. Antony was a man of action, but he had a deep respect for learning, and he was constantly amazed by the breadth and depth of Cleopatra's knowledge. She was his teacher, his confidante, his partner in every sense of the word. She shared with him her dream of a new world order, a Hellenistic empire in the East, ruled from Alexandria, that would be a partner, not a subject, to Rome. It was a vision that appealed to Antony's own grandiose ambitions. He had always been more at home in the East than in the cold, calculating world of Roman politics. He began to see himself as a new Alexander the Great, with Cleopatra as his queen, carving out a new empire that would rival and perhaps even surpass the glory of Rome. But while Antony and Cleopatra were lost in their world of love and dreams, the world outside Alexandria was in turmoil. In Italy, Antony's wife, Fulvia, a formidable and politically astute woman, had raised an army against Octavian. She had done so in her husband's name, hoping to force him to return to Italy and confront his young rival. But the plan backfired. Octavian, with his superior military and political skills, crushed the rebellion. Fulvia was forced into exile, where she died a short time later. At the same time, the Parthians, taking advantage of Antony's absence, had launched a major invasion of Rome's eastern provinces. They had overrun Syria and were threatening to push further into Asia Minor. Antony's pleasure-filled winter in Alexandria had come at a steep price. His reputation in Rome was in tatters, his political position was severely weakened, and his authority in the East was being challenged. News of these disasters finally pierced the bubble of the inimitable livers. Antony was forced to confront the reality he had so happily ignored. He had to leave Alexandria. He had to return to Rome to deal with Octavian, to mend the fences of their fractured alliance, and to confront the Parthian threat. His departure was a somber one. The revels were over. Cleopatra was once again left alone in Alexandria. But this time, she was not just a queen who had lost her lover. She was a mother-to-be. She was pregnant with Antony's children, twins, a boy and a girl. She would name them Alexander Helios, the sun, and Cleopatra Selene, the moon. They were the children of a great love affair, born of a winter of unforgettable revelry. But they were also born into a world of increasing danger and uncertainty. Their father was gone, and their mother was left to face the future alone, a future that would be defined by the ever-growing rivalry between the two most powerful men in the Roman world, Mark Antony and Octavian. The party was over, and the long, slow slide towards tragedy had begun. The journey back to Italy was a sobering one for Mark Antony. The warm, sun-drenched world of Alexandria, with its intoxicating blend of pleasure and passion, seemed a lifetime away. He was returning to a world of cold political calculation, of broken alliances and simmering resentments. His reputation had been tarnished by his winter of debauchery, his authority in the East undermined by the Parthian invasion, and he had to face Octavian, his young, ambitious, and increasingly powerful rival. The meeting between the two triumvirs was fraught with tension. Octavian, ever the master of propaganda, had used Antony's affair with Cleopatra to his own advantage. He painted Antony as a man who had been bewitched by a foreign sorceress, a man who had abandoned his Roman duties for the decadent pleasures of the East. He presented himself as the true heir of Caesar, the defender of Roman virtue, the guardian of the Republic. But both men knew that another civil war would be disastrous for Rome. The empire was weary of conflict. The legions were loyal to both leaders, and a clash between them would tear the Roman world apart. And so a truce was brokered. The Treaty of Brundisium was signed in 40 BC, a fragile pact designed to paper over the cracks in their crumbling alliance. The empire was redivided, Antony's authority in the East was reaffirmed, and a new bond was forged to seal the deal. Antony was to marry Octavian's sister. Octavia, she was a woman who was the complete antithesis of Cleopatra. She was a model of Roman matronly virtue, modest, loyal, and deeply respected for her gentle and dignified nature. She was a woman who had been recently widowed, and her marriage to Antony was a purely political arrangement, a symbol of the renewed friendship between the two most powerful men in Rome. For the next 3 years, Antony lived in a state of self-imposed exile from his own passions. He settled in Athens with his new wife, Octavia, and for a time he seemed to embrace his new role as a respectable Roman husband and statesman. He lived a relatively quiet life, shunning the extravagant excesses that had characterized his time in Alexandria. He and Octavia had 2 daughters together, and their marriage, while not a love match, was a harmonious one. Octavia was a devoted wife, and Antony, it seemed, was a dutiful husband. During this time, Cleopatra was in Alexandria, ruling her kingdom and raising her twin children, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. The news of Antony's marriage to Octavia must have been a bitter blow. She had given him her heart, she had borne him children, and he had seemingly abandoned her for a political alliance. But Cleopatra was a pragmatist. She understood the complex game of Roman politics, and she knew that Antony's marriage was a strategic necessity. She did not rail against him or plot revenge. She waited. She focused on governing Egypt, her administrative skills, ensuring that her kingdom remained stable and prosperous. She continued to present herself as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, a divine mother who protected her people and her children. Her court was a center of Hellenistic culture and learning, a beacon of civilization in a world that was constantly being torn apart by Roman ambition. She was a queen in her own right, her power not dependent on any man. But she never forgot Antony. Their connection, forged in the fires of passion and shared ambition, was too strong to be broken by a political marriage. She knew that his heart was not in Athens, that his soul longed for the vibrant and intoxicating world of the East, and she knew that his dream of conquering Parthia, a dream that would secure his place in history as a second Alexander the Great, was still very much alive. And to achieve that dream, he would need her wealth, her resources, and her strategic mind. In the year 37 BC, the opportunity she had been waiting for arrived. Antony's fragile truce with Octavian was once again on the verge of collapse. He needed ships to fight a naval war against Sextus Pompey, the son of Pompey the Great, who had become a powerful pirate king in the Mediterranean. Octavian was reluctant to help. Antony, frustrated and impatient, turned his gaze back to the east. He sent for Cleopatra. They met in Antioch, and it was as if the intervening 3 years had never happened. The spark between them was instantly rekindled, the old magic still as potent as ever. Antony was a man who had been starved of passion, of intellectual companionship, of the grand and glorious vision of life that he had shared with Cleopatra. Octavia was a good woman, a fine wife, but she could not stir his soul or fire his imagination in the way that the Queen of Egypt could. He had come to ask for her help, to beg for her resources, but he was also a man coming home. He was returning to the woman he loved, the woman who was the mother of his children. He was returning to a world where he was not just a Roman general, but a king, a god, a partner in a dream of empire. Cleopatra, for her part, welcomed him with open arms, but she was no longer the starry-eyed lover of their first winter in Alexandria. She was a queen who had learned the hard lessons of power. She drove a hard bargain. In exchange for her support, she demanded a vast expansion of her kingdom. Antony, swept away by his renewed passion and his desperate need for her help, agreed to all her demands. He gave her Cyprus, Crete, parts of Syria and Judea, and the rich cedar forests of Lebanon. It was a massive transfer of Roman territory to a foreign queen, an act that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. The Roman interlude was over. Antony had made his choice. He had turned his back on Rome, on his political alliance with Octavian, on his respectable Roman wife. He had chosen Cleopatra. He had chosen a future in the East, a future that would be built on a foundation of love, ambition, and a shared dream of empire. It was a choice that would set them on a collision course with Octavian, a choice that would lead to a final, epic confrontation, a confrontation that would decide the fate of the Roman world and seal their tragic destiny. The reunion of Antony and Cleopatra in Antioch marked a turning point in their relationship and in the history of the late Roman Republic. It was no longer just a passionate affair between a Roman general and an Egyptian queen. It had become a powerful political and military alliance, a new center of power in the East that directly challenged the authority of Octavian in the West. Antony had made his bed, and it was a bed of Egyptian silk and gold, not Roman wool. From Antioch, they returned to Alexandria, and the city once again became the stage for their grand ambitions. Cleopatra gave birth to another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus, his name a nod to the great Ptolemaic kings of the past, a clear statement of their dynastic intentions. Their family was now a burgeoning royal house, a fusion of Roman and Ptolemaic blood, with a claim to a vast and powerful empire. Antony, with Cleopatra's financial backing, finally launched his long-delayed invasion of Parthia. It was to be the crowning achievement of his military career, the campaign that would cement his legacy as a second Alexander. But the campaign was a disaster. Antony, though a brilliant battlefield commander, was a poor strategist. He was outmaneuvered by the Parthians. His supply lines were cut, and his army was forced into a long and brutal retreat through the freezing mountains of Armenia. He lost more than a third of his men, a devastating blow to his military prestige and his personal pride. He returned to Alexandria not as a conquering hero, but as a defeated general. But Cleopatra did not greet him with reproaches or recriminations. She met him with open arms, with comfort, with fresh supplies and reinforcements. She understood that his defeat was a setback, not an end. She helped him to salvage his reputation, to turn a military disaster into a political triumph. In 34 BC, they staged a spectacle in Alexandria that would send shockwaves through the Roman world. It was a bizarre and unprecedented ceremony, a perversion of the traditional Roman triumph, and it would become known as the Donations of Alexandria. Instead of celebrating a victory in Rome, Antony celebrated his campaign in the heart of the Egyptian capital. He entered the city in a triumphal chariot, leading his Armenian captives in chains. But the real spectacle was what followed. In the city's gymnasium, on 2 golden thrones, sat Antony and Cleopatra, dressed as the gods Dionysus and Isis. On lower thrones sat their children, Caesarion, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and the young Ptolemy Philadelphus. Antony then rose to speak. His words were a bombshell that would shatter the fragile peace of the Roman world. He declared Cleopatra to be the Queen of Kings, the ruler of Egypt, Cyprus, Libya, and Coeli Syria. He proclaimed Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar, to be the King of Kings and the legitimate heir of his deified father, a direct challenge to the legitimacy of Octavian, who owed his power and position to his status as Caesar's adopted son. He then proceeded to parcel out the eastern half of the Roman Empire to his own children. With Cleopatra, Alexander Helios was named king of Armenia, Media, and Parthia, a kingdom that Antony had yet to conquer. Ptolemy Philadelphus was given Syria, Phoenicia, and Cilicia, and Cleopatra Selene was made the ruler of Cyrenaica and Crete. It was an act of breathtaking arrogance and political suicide. Antony, in his love for Cleopatra and his obsession with his Eastern dream, had completely lost touch with reality. He was giving away Roman territory that had been won with Roman blood, to a foreign queen and her children. He was publicly rejecting his Roman identity and embracing the role of an Eastern Hellenistic monarch. The news of the Donations of Alexandria was a gift to Octavian. He had been waiting for Antony to make a fatal mistake, and this was it. He seized upon the Donations as proof of everything he had been saying about Antony, that he was a traitor to Rome, a man bewitched by a foreign sorceress, a man who sought to establish a new empire in the East with Alexandria as its capital. Octavian's propaganda machine went into overdrive. He portrayed Cleopatra as a decadent, power-hungry harlot who had used her seductive wiles to ensnare a noble Roman general. He painted her as a threat to Roman security, a foreign queen who sought to rule over the Roman people. He stoked the fires of xenophobia and misogyny, creating a caricature of Cleopatra that would endure for centuries. He obtained Antony's will from the Temple of the Vestal Virgins in Rome, a sacrilegious act that he justified by claiming it was in the public interest. He read the will aloud to the Senate and the people of Rome. It confirmed their worst fears. Antony had requested to be buried in Alexandria, next to Cleopatra. He had acknowledged Caesarion as Caesar's true son. He had left vast legacies to his children with the Egyptian queen. The tide of public opinion in Rome turned decisively against Antony. He was no longer seen as a hero of the Republic, but as an enemy of the state. Octavian, sensing his advantage, persuaded the Senate to declare war, but he did not declare war on Antony. That would have been to risk another civil war. Instead, with a stroke of propagandistic genius, he declared war on Cleopatra. It was a war against a foreign queen, a war to defend Roman values against the corrupting influence of the East, a war to protect the Republic from the ambitions of a dangerous and seductive woman. But everyone knew who the real target was. The final epic confrontation between Octavian and the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra was now inevitable. The stage was set for a battle that would decide the fate of the Roman world, a battle that would take place on the shimmering waters of the Ionian Sea, near a small promontory called Actium. The year is 31 BC. A sense of impending doom hangs over the Mediterranean world. The long simmering rivalry between Octavian and Antony has finally boiled over into open conflict. It is a war that will be fought not just with swords and ships, but with words and images. A war of propaganda as much as a war of military might. Octavian has cast himself as the savior of Rome, the defender of republican virtue, leading a crusade against a treacherous Roman general and his decadent foreign queen. Antony and Cleopatra, in turn, have positioned themselves as the rulers of a new Hellenistic empire, a vibrant and cultured world that stands in defiance of Roman austerity and aggression. The two sides gather their forces for a final, decisive confrontation. Antony and Cleopatra have assembled a massive fleet of some 500 warships, many of them of enormous size, with multiple banks of oars and towering wooden castles. Their army is a vast, multinational force drawn from all corners of the eastern Mediterranean. They establish their headquarters in the Gulf of Ambracia, on the western coast of Greece, near a promontory called Actium. Octavian, though his ships are smaller and fewer in number, has a crucial advantage. He has Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, a military genius of the highest order. As his admiral, Agrippa is a brilliant strategist, a master of naval warfare, and he immediately sets about outmaneuvering his opponents. He blockades the Gulf of Ambracia, trapping Antony and Cleopatra's fleet inside the narrow strait. He cuts off their supply lines, and soon disease and desertion begin to take their toll on Antony's army. The situation in Antony's camp becomes increasingly desperate. His Roman officers urge him to abandon his fleet and fight a land battle in Greece, where his legions are stronger. But Cleopatra, whose own fleet is a significant part of their naval force, and whose treasure is on board her ships, insists on a naval battle. She does not trust the loyalty of Antony's Roman soldiers, and she believes that their only hope is to break out of the blockade and return to Egypt, where they can regroup and continue the fight. Antony, torn between the advice of his Roman generals and his loyalty to Cleopatra, makes a fateful decision. He will fight at sea, but it is a plan born of desperation, not of sound military strategy. He knows that his large, heavy ships are no match for Octavian's smaller, more agile vessels in a conventional battle. His plan is not to win a decisive victory, but to break through the blockade and escape. He orders his men to bring the sails and masts on board their warships, a clear sign that they intend to flee, not to fight to the finish. This decision has a devastating effect on the morale of his troops. Many of them, seeing that their commander is planning to abandon them, desert to Octavian's side. On the 2nd of September, the day of the battle dawns. The sea is calm, the sky a brilliant blue. Antony's fleet, a forest of towering masts and purple sails, emerges from the Gulf of Ambracia. They form a massive crescent, their large, imposing ships a formidable sight. Octavian's fleet, led by Agrippa, is waiting for them. The battle begins. It is a chaotic and brutal affair. Octavian's smaller ships, like a pack of nimble wolves, swarm around Antony's larger, more cumbersome vessels. They dart in and out, ramming their opponents, shearing off their oars, and showering them with a hail of arrows and catapult stones. Antony's ships are like giant lumbering beasts, unable to maneuver in the tight confines of the battle. They are floating fortresses, difficult to capture, but also difficult to fight with. For hours, the battle rages with no clear victor. And then, a strange and unexpected event occurs. Cleopatra, whose squadron of 60 ships has been held in reserve behind the main battle line, suddenly gives the signal to hoist sails. Her ships, catching a favorable wind, break through the chaos of the battle and head south towards Egypt. Antony, seeing her leave, makes a decision that will seal his doom and forever tarnish his reputation. He abandons his flagship, abandons his men who are fighting and dying for him, and boards a smaller, faster vessel. He follows Cleopatra. He follows the woman he loves, fleeing from the battle that will decide his fate. The sight of their commanders deserting them shatters the remaining morale of Antony's fleet. Some of his ships continue to fight with desperate courage, but the battle is lost. One by one, they are either captured or sunk. By the end of the day, the sea is a graveyard of broken ships and drowning men. Octavian has won a complete and overwhelming victory. The aftermath of the battle is a study in contrasts. Octavian is hailed as a hero, the savior of Rome. He is the undisputed master of the Roman world. His victory at Actium marks the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Antony and Cleopatra, in contrast, are fugitives. They manage to escape to Egypt, but they are broken and defeated. Antony is a man consumed by shame and despair. He has lost his army, his honor, and his dream of empire. He retreats into a world of brooding silence, refusing to see even Cleopatra. Cleopatra, however, does not give up. She is a queen, a mother, and she will fight to the very end to protect her kingdom and her children. She begins to prepare for a last desperate stand against the approaching forces of Octavian. She tries to rally her people, to rekindle the spirit of resistance. She even begins to explore audacious plans of escape, of dragging her fleet across the desert to the Red Sea and sailing to a new land, perhaps India, where they can start a new life. Chemspot, a new life. But it is too late. The serpent has been cornered. The victor of Actium is on his way to Alexandria, and he is coming to claim his prize. The final act of this great historical drama is about to begin, and it will be played out in the magnificent city that has been the stage for so much of Cleopatra's life, a city that will now become her tomb. The year is 30 BC. A long, hot summer descends upon Egypt. But the heat that oppresses the land is not just from the sun, it is the heat of fear, the suffocating certainty of impending doom. Octavian, the cold and calculating victor of Actium, is advancing on Alexandria. His legions, seasoned and relentless, are like a slow-moving tide, and there is no force in Egypt that can hold them back. Antony and Cleopatra are trapped in their gilded cage. The vibrant city of Alexandria, once the scene of their greatest triumphs and most extravagant pleasures, has become their prison. Their friends and allies have deserted them, flocking to the side of the victor. Their once mighty army has dissolved like sand castles before the advancing tide. They are alone, two tragic figures playing out the final, heart-wrenching scene of their epic love story. Antony is a ghost of his former self. The charismatic, larger-than-life general has been consumed by a black cloud of despair. He spends his days in a self-imposed exile, in a small house he has built by the sea, which he calls his Timonium, after a famous Athenian misanthrope who hated all mankind. He is a man at war with himself, haunted by his failures, tormented by his lost honor. He has lost his empire, he has lost his army, and he believes he has lost the respect of the woman for whom he sacrificed everything. Cleopatra, however, is not yet ready to surrender. She is a queen, and she will die a queen. She barricades herself in her mausoleum, a magnificent tomb she has been building near the temple of Isis. It is a fortress of stone, filled with her most precious treasures, gold, silver, pearls, and a vast quantity of flammable materials. She sends a message to Octavian, offering to abdicate in favor of her children. It is a desperate, last-ditch attempt to save her dynasty. Octavian's reply is cold and unambiguous. He will be merciful to her if she will betray Antony, if she will have him killed. It is a demand that Cleopatra, for all her pragmatism, cannot bring herself to meet. Her love for Antony, a love that has been tested by war, separation, and defeat, is the one thing she has left. She will not betray him. As Octavian's forces enter the city, Antony decides to make one last heroic stand. He leads his remaining cavalry in a desperate charge against the enemy. For a brief, glorious moment, the old Antony, the brilliant warrior, re-emerges. He fights with the fury of a cornered lion, and he wins a small but meaningless victory. He returns to the palace, his spirits momentarily lifted, and asks for Cleopatra. And then, a false rumor reaches him, a rumor that will be his undoing. He is told that Cleopatra is dead, that she has taken her own life. Whether this rumor was started by Cleopatra herself, in a misguided attempt to test his love, or by some other source, we will never know. But for Antony, the news is a final crushing blow. With Cleopatra gone, there is nothing left to live for. I am not grieved to be parted from you, Cleopatra, he says to himself, but it grieves me that I, a great commander, should be found to be of a less noble spirit than a woman. He asks his loyal servant, Eros, to kill him, but Eros, unable to bring himself to strike his master, kills himself instead. Antony, inspired by this act of loyalty, falls upon his own sword, but the wound is not immediately fatal. He lies on the floor of the palace, bleeding and in agony. He learns that Cleopatra is not dead, that she is alive and barricaded in her mausoleum. He begs his servants to carry him to her. What follows is one of the most poignant and tragic scenes in all of history. Cleopatra and her two handmaidens, Ireas and Charmian, are too afraid to open the doors of the tomb, so they lower ropes from a window and haul the dying Antony up the stone walls. He is a dead weight, his armor heavy, his body slick with blood. It is a Herculean task for the three women, a final, desperate act of love and devotion. They bring him inside, and Cleopatra lays him on her golden couch. She weeps over him, tearing her clothes and beating her breast. She calls him her emperor, her husband, her lord. She tries to staunch the flow of blood, but it is too late. Antony asks for a last drink of wine. He comforts her, tells her not to grieve for him, but to remember the glorious life they lived together. He tells her to trust no one in Octavian's circle except a man named Proculaeus. And then, in the arms of the woman he loved, the great Mark Antony dies. Cleopatra's grief is immense, but her ordeal is not yet over. Octavian is the master of Alexandria, and she is his prisoner. He sends Proculaeus to her, as Antony had advised. Proculaeus speaks to her through the barred gate of the mausoleum, offering her words of comfort and reassurance. But it is a trick. While he distracts her, other Roman soldiers climb into the tomb through the same window that was used to hoist up Antony. Cleopatra is captured. She tries to stab herself with a dagger she has hidden in her dress, but she is disarmed. She is a prisoner of the man who has destroyed her world. She is the last pharaoh of Egypt, and her kingdom is no more. It will become a Roman province, the personal property of its new emperor. But the serpent has one last strike left in her. She will not be led in chains through the streets of Rome. She will not be a living trophy in Octavian's triumph. She will find a way to control her own destiny, to stage her own final, magnificent exit. The Queen of Egypt is a prisoner in her own palace. The splendor of her surroundings is a bitter mockery of her captive state. She is watched day and night by Roman guards, her every move monitored, her every word reported back to Octavian. The new master of the world is taking no chances. He wants her alive. He needs her alive. She is to be the star attraction in his triumphal procession in Rome, the living symbol of his victory, the ultimate proof of his power. To be paraded through the streets of Rome in chains is the greatest humiliation a defeated monarch can suffer, and Octavian intends to savor every moment of it. Cleopatra knows this. The thought of it is more terrifying to her than death itself. She, who has lived her life as a goddess, as a queen of kings, will not be reduced to a public spectacle for the amusement of the Roman mob. She has one last weapon left, her own life, and she will use it to deny Octavian his ultimate prize. She feigns despair. She falls into a deep melancholy. She refuses to eat. She allows a fever to consume her, her body growing weaker by the day. It is a convincing performance, and it gives her the opportunity she needs. She asks for permission to visit Antony's tomb, to pay her last respects. Octavian, perhaps feeling a flicker of pity, or perhaps believing that a grieving woman is a less dangerous one, grants her request. At the tomb, she weeps and wails, her grief a raw and powerful torrent. She speaks to Antony's spirit, her words a mixture of love, longing, and defiance. "O dearest Antony," she cries, "they have taken everything from me but the grief and sorrow I feel for you. But I will not be separated from you for long. Prepare to receive me, for nothing can keep us apart. It is a final farewell and a promise." She returns to the palace and seems to have a change of heart. She begins to eat again. She takes care of her appearance. She sends a message to Octavian, a list of the treasures she wishes to give to his wife, Livia, and his sister, Octavia. She seems to be resigning herself to her fate, preparing for the journey to Rome. Octavian is pleased. His prize is secure. Cleopatra then orders a magnificent final banquet to be prepared. She dismisses all her guards except for her two most loyal and devoted handmaidens, Iris and Charmian. They have been with her through everything, and they will be with her at the end. She writes a letter, seals it, and gives it to a trusted messenger to deliver to Octavian. And then, the moment arrives. A humble countryman is brought before her, carrying a basket of figs. He offers it to the queen, a simple gift. The guards inspect the basket, but see nothing amiss. They let him pass, but hidden beneath the large, luscious figs is a deadly secret, an asp, the sacred serpent of the pharaohs, the instrument of divine judgment. The details of what happens next are shrouded in mystery, embellished by legend. The most enduring story, the one that has captured the imagination of poets and artists for centuries, is that Cleopatra takes the asp and places it on her breast. She welcomes its bite, its sharp teeth, as a lover's kiss. The venom works quickly, a sleepy numbness that brings a painless end to her suffering. Another theory suggests that she used a hollow pin filled with a potent poison to prick her skin. Still another claims that she drank a poisonous concoction. We will never know for certain the exact method she chose, but the result is the same. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, the serpent of the Nile, is dead. When Octavian receives her letter, he knows at once what she has done. The letter is a final plea, a request to be buried in the same tomb as Antony. He rushes to the palace, but it is too late. He finds her lying on her golden couch, dressed in her finest royal robes, looking not like a defeated prisoner, but like a queen who is merely sleeping. Eris is lying dead at her feet. Charmian, barely able to stand, is adjusting the diadem on Cleopatra's head. "Was this well done of your lady, Charmian?" one of Octavian's men asks. "It was very well done," she replies, her voice a faint whisper, and befitting the descendant of so many kings. And then she, too, collapses and dies. Octavian is furious. He has been cheated of his triumph. The serpent has struck one last time, and her venom is the bitter taste of his hollow victory. But he is also, it is said, filled with a grudging admiration for her courage, for the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. He grants her final wish. He has her buried with full royal honors, next to the man she loved. Their tomb becomes a symbol of their tragic love story, a monument to a passion that defied empires and changed the course of history. He then proceeds to erase her from the official record. He has her statues torn down, her name removed from public monuments. He executes her eldest son, Caesarion, proclaiming that it is not good to have too many Caesars. Her other children with Antony are taken to Rome and raised by the woman they had wronged, the noble and forgiving Octavia. Octavian's propaganda machine continues its work, painting Cleopatra as a monstrous and decadent queen, a cautionary tale of the dangers of female power and foreign influence. This is the image that will dominate the historical narrative for the next 2,000 years. But it is a caricature, a ghost, a shadow of the real woman, the true Cleopatra, the scholar, the diplomat, the brilliant and courageous queen, lies silent in her tomb, her story waiting to be rediscovered, her legacy waiting to be reclaimed.